what's going on, y'all? T-Bob here.
And Jake as well.
And you're about to watch a little OTB LSU.
We're going to give you all the latest, greatest between LSU football, baseball, women's basketball, softball, and everything in between.
Bottom line, if you want to talk Tigers, keep it locked, subscribe, like it, and we hope you enjoy it.
Joe Sloan, LSU co-offensive coordinator, he met with the media yesterday after practice, and you know, when they announced that Joe Sloan and Cortez Hankton were going to be co-offensive coordinators, a lot of people raised a little bit of eyebrows, myself as well, because a lot of times we've seen a two-coordinator system not work that well. But we did see a tease of it in the bowl game. So the bowl game dynamic was kind of Joe Sloan up in the press box. He's calling the play. He sends it down to Hankton. Hankton then sends it into Garrett Nussmeier, and we're like, okay, how's that going to work? And it was shaky in the first half. I mean, you guys saw the offense struggle a little bit. They seemed a little bit confused, had to call some timeouts. But as they got more comfortable with each other, they wound up getting into a groove and ultimately winning that game. I always wonder about the dynamics in a two-coordinator system because a butting of heads could occur as well, right? If Sloan calls something Hankton doesn't like, he tries to change it. How's that going to work? That does not appear to be an issue because with Sloan and Hankton, Joe Sloan talked to the media yesterday, and he said that he has a really good relationship with Cortez Hankton.
I think we have an unbelievable offensive staff. And Cortez, you know, everybody sees his development at the receiver position. I think what people don't see is his ability to game plan, his ability to understand how to attack defenses in the passing game. And he was doing a ton of that last year. You know, that's not anything new. And I think then where, you know, just with our new roles and his growth and just tying back in as well more into the run game, perimeter game, whether it be from an RPO standpoint or whatever that might be, and just his involvement there, we have an awesome working relationship.
And I think that's important, right? Because Joe Sloan and Cortez Hankton, they were both on this staff last year. Hankton is the receivers coach. Sloan is the QB coach. You're breaking in a new quarterback, but that's part of the reason you elevated a Joe Sloan, right? He already had a working relationship with Garrett Nussmeier. You imagine with the lack of depth at running back and all of these weapons, the passing game is going to be the biggest part of your offense. Having your former QB coach and your wide receiver coach as co-offensive coordinators probably seems like it's going to help the passing game in a big way. Look, as far as that passing game goes, Garrett Nussmeier's had the spotlight on him in the spring, right? We talked about it yesterday. He's one of those players that's going to have to step up in a big way because this is his fourth spring at LSU. This is his third year under Brian Kelly, his second year with Joe Sloan. So he's not coming into a brand new position, but he's going to have a little bit of a different mindset because this is his first spring coming in knowing that he is going to be the starting quarterback. He has big shoes to fill, take it over for Jaden Daniels. Now, we've talked ad nauseum about, Garrett Nussmeier is such a great leader. He always has been, but the role is going to change a little bit. I think people's biggest issue is, look, Nuss has came in and he's been that gunslinger, right? I mean, he's willing to take chances. We've only seen him start a game where he doesn't have to just come in relief and kind of play as free. He started that game and he was a little bit shaky to start. Now he picked it up in a big way and led you on a game-winning drive, but a lot of people are thinking, how is he looking during spring as that starting quarterback? And Joe Sloan, well, he tells us this is what he thinks of Garrett Nussmeier's development.
His big thing has been playing within the structure of the offense and understanding when to take, maybe challenge a throw, right, and when not to. That's been the big emphasis, just from a do-your-job mentality and having tight feet. When Garrett has tight feet and he has his feet underneath of him, he makes really good decisions. And so it really is a technique thing, which is in his control. So we try to keep him focused on that. I've been really, really pleased this spring with how he's done that.
Yeah, for sure. Look, I think Garrett Nussmeier is going to take a big step forward. Your position coach from a year ago is now your offensive coordinator. He's your play caller. And again, this is his first year starting, but he's been in the program a number of years. This is year 3 with him and Brian Kelly together. He knows exactly what his head coach expects of the quarterback position. He got to learn under a guy like Jaden Daniels, who was the most dynamic player in college football, one of the best players to ever step foot in your program. I think Nuss is going to be fine. And he's going to have a lot of help as well, right? LSU always seems to have a ton of depth at receiver. And that's weird to say coming into the spring because you're replacing 2 first-round receivers. Malik Neighbors seems like a lock in the top 10. He might even go top 5. Brian Thomas, after that big combine he had, he's moving up into the mid-teens right now. I mean, both of these guys are locks to be in the first round. Now, we know about Kyron Lacey. We know about Chris Hilton. They seem locked in at 2 of the receiver spots. Big question all spring long, and we've seen a big rotation of it, right? Sometimes it's Aaron Anderson, but you do bring in some transfers. You have a lot of talent in that room. You brought in C.J. Daniels from Liberty. You brought in Xavier Thomas. Those are guys that you've been keeping an eye on. And as far as some of those transfer receivers go, Sloan, he mentioned C.J. Daniels first. He talked about what he's seen from him during spring practice.
CJ just brings such a level of consistency. You can see the experience and how he plays. He's an extremely smart player, and he's physical, and he is strong through the catch. I think he's going to be a huge piece for what we're doing in the fall and putting him in different positions where he can use his strengths. And I think when you look at, obviously, right, we spoke about the returners a little bit, but CJ, the level of leadership that he's brought to the room and consistent work habits, it's been really good to see. And the challenging thing for him is he's learning. Some of these other guys who have been here, they've run these plays multiple times. He's learning. So every day out there, he's learning and he's getting better. And as we've watched through spring, just our ability to say, hey, we need a big catch, we can go his way, and he continues to produce.
Yeah, and I love what he mentioned about, look, he's new, he's still learning the offense, so he's a little bit behind the curve right now, but he's still a leader, he's still a reliable guy. That's because he's had 3 years of college football experience under his belt. He was at Liberty. He was excellent a year ago. I mean, he was kind of the big name transfer that you brought in that room, right? He had 1,000 yards receiving last year. He had the double-digit touchdowns. He's a guy that when you signed him, everybody's like, hey, look, we're not going to chalk it in just yet, but we're going to pencil him in that number 3 spot and see what happens. Now, he hasn't been taking number 1 reps a ton during spring. It has been Aaron Anderson, but I think it was interesting that Joe Sloan mentioned, look, the more he learns, because the more familiar he becomes with his offense, the more 1 reps he's going to get. Keep your eye out for C.J. Daniels. He's also not the only transfer that you brought in at receiver. We talked about it a minute ago. This is Xavier Thomas. Not only does he have college football experience, he has SEC experience because you bring him in from Mississippi State. You thought he was going to be more of your returner because that's what you've been missing in the return game, right? A legitimate threat back there, whether it's punt return, kickoff return, that's something you have not had in a number of years, but he's a legitimate receiver as well. He caught some big balls out there at Mississippi State. He had some big time moments in an offense that threw the ball a lot, and this is what Joe Sloan had to say about Xavier Thomas.
Xavion's explosive. You can just see he has such a feel for space and holes. He's made some really big plays down the field. He's got a lot of speed, but I think ultimately, right, trying to get him the ball in space and maybe create punt returns on offense. And we'll have the ability to do that with him and as well with Aaron. I think Aaron's played a really good football as well. And Kyle Parker, different guys who have the ability to maybe work small areas, but Xavion's been just a treat to have here. And again, I speak to his level of toughness, and I think that's been what's probably been the most exciting for our offensive staff and those 2 guys walking in. They're both tough football players.
Yeah, I like that he mentioned both Aaron Anderson and Kyle Parker. Kyle Parker is a receiver. He came in a year ago. He redshirted, but people were high on him, and they saw the athletic ability off the jump. He's a guy that has gotten a ton of 1 reps in the spring, right? If it's not Aaron Anderson in the slot, most of the time it has been Kyle Parker. Those guys kind of seem like the front runners for that number 3 spot. Again, watch out for C.J. Daniels. But as far as a guy that is a little bit under the radar that people aren't talking about a ton during spring is Shelton Samson. And it's a little odd because he is probably your tallest receiver, right? I mean, he's 6'4", 6'5". He was a 5-star out of Catholic High right here in Baton Rouge. You had a lot of high hopes for him a year ago. He was a little bit raw, maybe needed to put on a few pounds before he was ready to go out there and handle a full SEC schedule. This is his 2nd year in the program. Can he make that year 2 jump? He's a guy we hadn't heard a lot about, but Joe Sloan talked about Shelton Samson as well.
Thanks, guys. Hey, I will tell you, Shelton Samson has made a ton of strides. I'd be remiss not to say just made some really big plays the last several days, so it's been good.
That's good to hear because when a talent like that comes in, you want to see him produce, right? He's a guy that has been running 3rd-team reps from what we've heard most of spring right now, but he seems to be building his way up. We talked about it. The athleticism is off the charts. He has the size. He has the speed you need. He just needed to get the technical down, right? It seems like he's doing that. The more the coaches talk about Shelton Samson, the more you can expect him on the field. I think he's going to be a big part of this receiver room, a room that has a lot of depth, right? We just spent 5 minutes or so talking about all these different receivers, but I think Shelton Samson is someone who can legitimately make an impact and can stand out in this receiver room in the upcoming year. But it's not just the wide receivers. We forget about this because Jaden Daniels' ability to run, the tight end position was kind of forgotten last year. One, Daniels improved so much as a deep ball passer that there wasn't a ton of passes to the tight end, right? You went to Brian Thomas, you went to Malik Neighbors, Kyron Lacey, Chris Hilton, you name it. Jaden Daniels was an excellent deep ball thrower last season. And taking off running, he didn't really need that safety net, if you will. Garrett Nussmeier is not quite the runner that Jaden Daniels is. Tight end could be a big weapon for him. And Mason Taylor is a guy that has been super consistent since he's gotten here. I mean, we forget about the big freshman year that he had. He made great plays in game 1 against Florida State. He caught that ball, took it about 20 yards up the field, had the intelligence and the football IQ to get out of bounds to stop that clock, to set up a potential game-tying extra point that ultimately got blocked. But he made a big play to just put you in that situation. He caught the 2-point conversion against Alabama. That's probably his most famous play. You expected big things from him a year ago, and it wasn't that he performed bad. It's just you didn't use him as much. He wasn't as big of a weapon or as big of a focal point in your offense. And a lot of people are wondering, hey, what's going to happen with Mason Taylor in this offense? Seems like he's going to have a bounce-back year because Joe Sloan said he expects big things from Mason Taylor.
Mason Taylor is one of our best football players. LSU fans know him for the last 2 years and just his consistency and his ability to make plays. And I think we want to find ways to get him the ball. And I think you could see Nuss working his way, or obviously we're going to go where the read takes us, but putting him in positions where he potentially is the first, second, or third read, where the ball maybe will find him a little bit more. But I think, just from a consistency standpoint and an experience standpoint, he obviously brings a ton. And I think he's one of the best tight ends in the country, and we definitely want to utilize him that way.
Yeah, that's something that you thought was going to happen a year ago, right? How much similar or dissimilar will Sloan's offense be to a Mike Denbrock? Because Denbrock really liked to use the tight ends. I mean, that was something that you heard about with Brian Kelly. Hey, his offensive lines are going to be stout, but he's an excellent recruiter at tight end as well. What does that mean for a Mason Taylor? We talked about it a second ago. Garrett Nussmeier, not quite the runner that a Jaden Daniels is. If you use these short passes to the tight end, at times that can almost be an extension of your running game, because not only do you lose Jaden Daniels, you lose a ton of running backs. You had 8 scholarship running backs in the fall last year. Right now, you got 2. Trey Holly's status, as we know, very much up in the air. Caden Durham's coming in. He's not here till the fall. You got Josh Williams and Caleb Jackson. That's it for your scholarship running backs. And Nuss is not the runner that Jaden Daniels is. So I think Mason Taylor is going to play a big role in the short passing game. You can use it almost as an extension of the running game. Now, I talked just a second ago about Brian Kelly's ability to recruit tight ends. We know the offensive line's deep. We know they're stout. They're probably the strength of this entire team. But what about the other tight ends? Because there's a lot of depth in that room. It's not just Mason Taylor. And Joe Sloan wanted to mention the depth at that position, talking about the other tight ends in that room.
Our other young tight ends, when you look at Pimp and Mac Markway, just how they've grown and how we're trying to grow the offense and use those guys more multiple. When we first got here, that was a room that really had to be rebuilt. And Coach Kelly and Coach Denbrock started that. And obviously they have a huge, Coach Kelly has a huge history with tight ends and what he's done with them over several years. But we wanted to grow that room. And I think we're close, right? We're close to getting there. And if, when you guys had an opportunity to be out at practice a little bit, I think you can see just how we want to use those guys a little bit more, just within the framework of what we do on offense.
That was a big emphasis when Kelly came in. Hey, we want to build that tight end room. I mean, Ed Orgeron's last season here, Jack Mashburn was your tight end number 2. He actually had to start some games. Now, he was great at that H-back role. I mean, he was vital in the game where Ty Davis Price went off against Florida, right? He set the single-game rushing record. They went right behind Jack Mashburn, but he wasn't really a receiving tight end. That room was very thin. You had about 2-3 tight ends on the roster at max. None of those guys are even here on campus anymore. And it's not just Mason Taylor. He talked about Mac Markway. He talked about Kamori and Pimpton. Connor Gilbreth. I mean, all of these guys that have played solid minutes. I mean, Mac Markway caught a touchdown last year. So when you look at Mason Taylor and you look at all these tight ends, you're going to get at least some production from that room. I expect Mason Taylor to go off this year. And it's not just those guys. Tre'Dez Green, who was one of your highest rated recruits, the big-time tight end out of Zachary, he's like 6'7", 6'8". He's coming in as well. You have a lot of talent in this room. I expect them to use them in a big way. So look, we talk receiver, we talk tight end. This all goes back to Garrett Nussmeier, right? The offense is there. We talked about the offensive line. You got Campbell and Emory Jones, 3-year starters at tackle. Garrett Dellinger is a veteran starter at guard. Miles Frazier is a veteran starter at guard. Your only newbie on that offensive line is DJ Chester at center, but by all accounts, I mean, he is handling it better than good. I mean, he's picking up right where Charles Turner left off. They expect big things from him. You got the receivers. You got a Kyron Lacy or Chris Hilton. One of those talented receivers is going to step up and emerge as that number 3 receiver. You got Mason Taylor. Not only Taylor, but you got all the talent behind him. Mac Markway, Kamorian Pimpton, Trades Green coming in the fall. Everything for Garrett Nussmeier to succeed is set up for him to do it. He's just got to go out there and do it. I think he will. I expect big things from him in 2024.
Wow, Jake, what incredible takes.
I mean, those guys, they're just the best.
I think so. And if you think so, again, hit the like button, subscribe, ring the bell so you get notifications when we post every single day here on OTB LSU.